Hello everyone. Today we are going to begin factor trinomials. So, yesterday I had you think about a couple of things. So, let's take a look at 1 through 8. This is what we did yesterday and we'll check your answers. So, number 1, they wanted to know what were two numbers that multiply to 35 and add to 12. So, turns out that 7 and 5 would be your two numbers. Because if I did 7 times 5, that equals 35. If I did 7 plus 5, that gives me 12. So those two numbers multiply to 35 and add to 12. If we take a look at number 2, what two numbers multiply to 40 and subtract to 6? That would be 10 and 4. So 10 times 4 gives me 40, and 10 minus 4 gives me 6. So that answers those two questions here. So if I keep going, number 3, you should have 6 and 4. Number 4, you would have 10 and 8. Number 5, you would have 7 and 1. Now number 6, there is actually no numbers that multiply to 32 and subtract to 1. So that's kind of a trick question that they threw at us. Number 7, two numbers that multiply to 14 and add to 9 would be 7 and 2. And for number 8, two numbers that multiply to 48 and subtract to 2, that would be 8 and 6. Now we are going to be using this skill when we factor trinomials. So I do want to show you a little trick in the calculator that would help you come up with these numbers if you struggle to come up with them by yourself. So I'm going to look at number 1 and show you what to do in the calculator. So it says what two numbers multiply to 35 and add to 12. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our calculator. I'm going to show you here. So I'm going to go to my calculator. And I'm going to go to the y equals. Now in the y equals, you're going to type in the number that we want to multiply to. So if you look at number 1, it says multiply to 35. So in my calculator, I'm going to do 35 divided by x. When I do that, I'm going to go to my table and look at all of my numbers. Now, let's start closer to 0 so we can kind of look at realistic numbers here. So, all these numbers multiply to 35. 1 times 35 is 35. 5 times 7 is 35. 7 times 5. So, all these numbers are showing you what multiplies to 35. So, now that we got the two numbers that multiply to 35, we need to find the two numbers in that table that will add to 12. So 1 plus 35, well, that doesn't add to 12. We don't care about decimals. 5 plus 7. Does 5 plus 7 give me 12? Let's see. If I quit out of the screen, 5 plus 7, that does give me 12. So we can use the calculator to help us with this. So, if you take a look here, I have 7 and 12 as my, 7 and 5 as my two numbers, and that's what we have in the calculator. So if we wanted to try one more, if we take a look at, let's say number 4, two numbers that multiply to 80 and add to 18. So if you wanted to use the calculator for this, you would go to your calculator. And remember, we want to find the two numbers that multiply to 80 first. So in my calculator, I'll type in 80 divided by x, and I go second graph. So now we know these are all the numbers that are going to multiply to 80. So now we have to find the two numbers that add to 18. So 1 plus 80, we know that's not 18. 40 plus 2, that wouldn't work. 4 plus 20, that doesn't add to 18. 16 and 5, that doesn't add to 18. Oh, what about 8 and 10? Let's see. So if I quit out of the screen and I try it, 8 plus 10, does that give me 18? Yes, it does. So 8 and 10 would be my numbers. So let's take a look at how we factor trinomials. First of all, let's talk about what a trinomial is. So a trinomial is when you have something that looks like this. Ax to the second power plus bx plus c. So really what we're looking at either an x squared or an x to the fourth power, then a number with an x, and a number by itself. Trinomial means 3 terms. So that's how we know when we're going to factor trinomials. We can write that down. Trinomial is 3 terms. Okay, so let's look at how we're going to do this. So number 1 says factor ax squared minus 7x plus 10. So the first thing we're going to do when we factor trinomials, we're just going to double bubble. Okay, so if we have an x to the second in the front, we are just going to have x and x. So now what we're going to do is we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to the last number and add to the middle number. So I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 10 and add to negative 7. So let's take a look. I'm not really good with negatives in my head. I'm sure a lot of you struggle with that too. That is okay. So we're going to have to use our calculator. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to first get my, here we go. So I go to my calculator and I go to y equals. And I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 10. So I'm going to do 10 divided by x in my calculator. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at the table. And I want to find 2 numbers that add to negative 7. Now, I know I'm going to need some negatives in here in order to get that negative 7. So I'm going to go to my negatives and I'm going to see. Negative 1 plus negative 10, that's not going to give me negative 7. Negative 2 plus negative 5, let's check it. Negative 2 plus negative 5, and that gives me negative 7. So those are my 2 numbers that multiply to 10 and add to negative 7. So it's going to be negative 2 and 5. Negative 5. Those are my 2 numbers that are going to multiply to 10 and add to negative 7. So all I'm going to do, I'm just going to put them in here like this. Negative 2, negative 5, and it doesn't matter which order. If you wanted to do minus 5, minus 2, that would be correct as well. So that's not too terrible once you kind of get used to it. So let's take a look at number 2. So number 2, we're going to same thing. We start off with a double bubble. And this time we have an x to the 4th power. Now, what we really want to do is split the x to the 4th power. And remember, when we split something, we're just dividing by 2. So that's why when I split x to the 4th in half, I get x to the 2nd and x to the 2nd. So really, if you see x to the 4th, we're just putting x to the 2nd because we're just splitting it up. Okay? So now what we're doing, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to 24 and add. We don't even need to circle that x squared. We don't really care about that x squared. We only care about that 10. Now, it's really important that you make sure you take the sign with it. See how I circled the positive 10 and the positive 24? So make sure you take those with it. So we're going to look for two numbers that multiply to 24 and add to 10. So I'll do it in the calculator to show you. So we're going to clear it out. Go to y equals. So two numbers that multiply to 24 and add to 10. Okay, well, we don't really want the negatives right now. The negatives aren't going to help us because we're looking for something that's positive. So 1 and 24, that won't help me. 2 and 12, that doesn't help me. 3 and 8, not quite. How about 6 and 4? Let's double check it. 6 plus 4, that does give me 10. So I'm going to go ahead and, now I'm sideways. All right, there we go. So 6 and 4. So I have a positive 6 and I have a positive 4. So this is my answer right here. All right, so I'm going to do one more with you, and then we'll have you try some on your own. So let's take a look at number 4 real quick. We'll skip on number 3, and we'll take a look at number 4. All right, so I'm double bubble. That part's pretty easy. And I have an x squared. So remember, when I split an x squared, I have an x, and I have an x. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 32 and add to negative 4. So let's write that down. Multiply to negative 32 and add to negative 4. So let's go ahead. Let's look at our calculator. So we said it was negative 32. So we go to y equals two numbers that add to negative 32. I'm sorry, multiply to negative 32. So we put negative 32 in our calculator, divide it by x, and we're going to look at our numbers. So now we're looking for two numbers that are going to add to negative 4. So let's see, 1 and negative 32, that won't work. 2 and negative 16, does that add to negative 4? No. What about 4 plus negative 8? Let's see. 4 plus negative 8, that gives me negative 4. There we have it. So we have 4 and negative 8. So positive 4, negative 8. So I'm going to write that in. And that's going to be my answer. So right now I want you to go ahead and I want you to try 3. We'll have you do 3, 5, and 6 on your own. So pause the video, and then when you hit play, we'll go over it together. Okay, so now that you've done it on your own, let's take a look at how you did. So let's take a look at number 3. So we double bubble. And we're looking for two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to 8. So when you did that, you should have got 4 and 4. Since we have the x squared, we just write x and x. And I have positive 4 and a positive 4. So there we have that. So let's take a look at number 5. For number 5, we double bubble. So we're going to find two numbers that multiply to 30 and add to negative 11. So when we do that, you should end up with negative 5 and negative 6. Remember, we have the x to the second power, so we're just going to have x and x. And we have negative 5 and negative 6. And number 6, let's see how we did. Alright, so we double bubble. Now be careful here because now we have that x to the fourth power. So remember, we're just dividing that number in half. We're dividing it by 2 to split it up. So that's how I got the x to the second there. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 5 and add to negative 4. Multiply to negative 5 and add to negative 4. So when we do that, you should have got negative 5 and positive 1. So this would be your answer. All right, so that is how we factor trinomials.